Thank you very much. I have an hour's worth of content, so I'm going to try and get through it. Tell me if I'm speaking too quickly or if I'm failing to describe any of the videos if there's not enough context in what I say. So my name is Kirsty McKnaught. I'm a software developer and a technical consultant, and I work with SpecialEffect on some software development projects. And I'm going to talk to you today about our EyeMine project. So this was designing an eye-controlled interface for Minecraft. And this is going to be a retrospective of how we went about tackling this problem, some of the lessons we learned along the way, what was surprisingly hard, and hopefully there'll be some takeaways for all of you guys. So who here, can we raise hands, already knows all about SpecialEffect? Quite a few, that's good. Just to give context to coming into this project, I wanted to say a couple of words. So SpecialEffect was created in 2007, and it really was inspired by the founder, Dr. Mick work in special education, where he'd been working with kids with disabilities and using with them various educational software on a computer. And he saw the potential of learning and assistive technology. And he kept on having parents coming to him and saying, this is fantastic, but when my kid comes home at the end of the school day, they can't join in with their siblings or their friends. They can't play. They're getting the learning at school, but they're not getting the play. And I've got a quote here from the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child. It says, every child has a right to play. Now, play is so important for children, for learning, for socialization, for exploration, for expression and creativity. And a lot of SpecialEffect's motivation has come from here. They don't exclusively work with children, but that was kind of the beginning, and that's something I'm going to talk about in this talk. So typically, with most of the work that SpecialEffect do, someone will get in touch and say, my kid wants to play an Xbox so that he can play with his friends. Or my kid wants to play FIFA because she loves football. And SpecialEffect, most of the time, will load up a van full of equipment and send a couple of occupational therapists to visit someone in their own environment. And they will try and get something working with whatever control inputs that person can do to achieve the things that they want to do in the gaming. They also have a games room, so people are welcome to come and visit us and try out lots of games and lots of controllers. So this is Finley playing FIFA with a single joystick and a couple of switches. Needless to say, I think everyone in the room understands that the kind of solutions different people need are very individual, very different. People have very diverse and complex needs. So most of SpecialEffect's work is very individual and one-to-one and specialist. So they'll go in and figure out what you can do to achieve what you want. So you get the usual kind of range of maybe a chin-controlled joystick, maybe a sip-puff tube. Alex here, when he was asked, what can you do that you might be able to use to control a computer, said, I'm really good with my eyebrows. And he can operate his eyebrows independently and use them like a switch. So EyeMine is a little bit different. SpecialEffect wanted to take what they had learned from a decade of working very much one-to-one and scale up the impact. So take a smaller niche of control inputs and one particular game and do something that could be used internationally. And they wanted to take this opportunity to showcase game accessibility with a flagship game that everyone knows about and people had been asking about for years, and wanted to make sure that what they were offering was all free, open source, and compatible with cheap consumer eye trackers, so not only expensive accessibility gear. Now, this audience, I'm pretty sure, will know what Minecraft is. But I wanted to share my perspective a little bit on what I've learned over this time. This is the point where I have to confess that I don't identify as a gamer. And I've learned a lot in the process of this about what it means for kids to play. I thought, when I started this, that Minecraft was a world in which you could build. We all know it's a sandbox game. You get created in a randomly generated world, and you can do anything here. And I often have trouble at this point explaining to parents, what do you do? And gamers aren't going to have a problem with this. You guys are all going to know what the potential is. But I originally thought, maybe it's like virtual Lego, you can build. And people do build amazing things, and for some people, that is the experience that they want. It's also an amazing environment for learning, whether that's learning simple cause and effect, learning to collaborate with your friends, building together, learning to build mechanisms, or rudimentary circuits with redstone. And that's another thing that parents can kind of get on board with. But actually, what's much more important for a lot of our users is that you have your own world, and you can go exploring. And whether that means finding different landscapes, finding different animals, going hunting for monsters, you can make it the experience that you want. And what Christopher was saying in the first talk really resonated with me. It's not about what can you do. Parents always say, what are they supposed to do in Minecraft? And the answer is anything. But it is a playground that you can have the experience that you want. And it was really important for me to understand that in thinking about how we could make it accessible to a really wide range of users. So Minecraft gives you a world in which you can explore. It gives you an opportunity for socialization. You can do role play with your friends. You can be spontaneous and be creative. So the goal of this project was to allow users to play Minecraft using only eye gaze. So obviously, some people can also use other control inputs, but we wanted to limit it to keep it simple in terms of people all over the world just downloading it and plugging it in and using their own hardware. So we wanted it to support a wide range of eye tracking hardware. We also wanted to support a wide range of eye gaze users, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. And as I said before, everything should be freely available. So eye tracking has been around since fairly early in the 20th century, and it used to look like this. So here's a picture of an eye tracking system from a laboratory in about 1930s or 40s. It's very awkward and clunky. You have to hold your head in exactly the right position. And the scientists can then look at where you are looking and use this for psychology experiments. This found commercial applications in advertising, because advertising has a lot of money to work out where people are looking. And this is where commercial eye trackers started to become available. And then around about 2000 or so, it started being used in assistive technology. So a lot of people communicate using eye gaze. So you might have an interface like this on the screen that has a grid of symbols, and if you look at a symbol and you look at it for 1 second, for example, it will click on it and either speak the word or allow you to build up a sequence of words to speak a sentence. And depending on your level of literacy, you might use this for spelling letters. Much more recently, in the last few years, there's been a move towards using eye tracking in gaming and virtual reality. So on the left here, I've got a picture of the Tobii IX, which is now branded the 4C. This is a consumer eye tracker. It costs about £150 compared to previous assistive eye trackers, which were many hundreds, if not thousands of pounds. And on the right, you can see that a lot of virtual reality headsets are now exploring using eye tracking. And in fact, Google, Facebook, and Apple have all, in the past couple of years, acquired an eye tracking company. So everyone's trying to get it into the mainstream, which makes it an exciting time for us to showcase the potential it offers for accessibility. So Megan already mentioned that Tomb Raider has some eye tracking features with Tobii. There's also a whole raft of mainstream games that are beginning to introduce gaze control for certain aspects of the play. For example, maybe aiming when you're shooting, so you pull a trigger, but the aiming is done with your eyes, or using your eyes like a flashlight in the environment, or the extended view that Megan mentioned. The standard paradigm for using eye gaze to control a computer is what we call a dwell click. So you can see here that I can look at one of the buttons on the screen, and I get visual feedback of like a timer. And once it completes, it performs a click on that button. So you can type things out letter by letter. And some more modern interfaces do allow you to speed this up a little bit with things like swipe. But the general idea of a dwell click is very common paradigm. You can also control the cursor. So here's an example, and I'll show the video again, where you tell your interface that you want to perform a double click, and then you move the mouse with your eyes, the cursor follows where you're looking, and then when you stop and you dwell in one location, it performs the action you asked for. So that's how eye gaze typically works. So that's the environment we're coming into and the interactions that people are accustomed to. I'll just say a little bit about the users, because from the outset of this project, we wanted to make sure that we were able to reach as large a user base as possible within eye gaze users. So we only assume you have eye gaze input. Very occasionally, a user might also have one switch. So Tiago here has a single switch, and he can use that for mining if he likes. But in all of our design decisions, we assume you only have eye gaze input. But your eye gaze abilities might be limited. You might not be able to accurately move a cursor and click on an icon like you saw previously. And to put this into perspective, this is a gross simplification, but for the purposes of talking about the different things that we did, I'm going to say that our range of users that we're considering can be considered on two axes. So on the x-axis here, we have cognitive ability. This will account for some users having cognitive disabilities, of course, but also at the high end of the scale, you're going to have people who are super determined, super patient, who have the motivation to really make something work. We also have a range of eye gaze ability. For example, someone might be able to use a computer and do all of the clicking, or they might just have very imprecise gaze control. And that's a function of not only experience, but also what kind of hardware do you have, and do you have anything about your eyes that make it harder for tracking. So if you might have drooping eyelids, or your eyes might shake, or one of them's lazy, that can make it harder to get really precise tracking. And up here, on the top right, we have what I'd call power users. And for reference, I'm a little bit inside of there. Power users could already kind of play Minecraft before we started this. So those of you who know any eye gaze interfaces, this is a commercial piece of software called The Grid, and you can put keys in the keyboard at the bottom that the user can select using eye gaze, and that will send a keyboard or mouse event to conventional Minecraft at the top. But this was difficult. It made for quite a nice demo. You might have seen it a few years ago when SpecialEffect were demoing it. But it required a lot of determination and patience to really play the game for any length of time. The goal of this project was to expand the users who could play Minecraft from these power users who were super determined and had brilliant eye gaze ability, down to somebody who could only access buttons that were very large, so maybe they could only access 3 different controls at a time. And maybe they've not played computer games before, so they don't necessarily, they might not be able to immediately understand complexities of the game. But it's also worth considering that these two things are independent. You might be someone who doesn't have any cognitive disabilities and you're super smart and determined and motivated, but for whatever reason, eye gaze input is difficult. So it's the only modality that you can control a computer with, but you can't be very precise. And we also want to give a good game experience to these people. So everyone here, we want to be able to have the best experience that they can without just dumbing down the gameplay. And this was something that we thought about throughout the project. So before I tell you about the different bits that we did and how they related to that, I'm just going to show you a picture of the final thing so that you get the context of how it all works. So here in the top 2/3 of the screen, you can see Minecraft. This is the Minecraft Java edition with some mods running in it to add some accessibility features. The bottom third of the screen, there's an eye gaze interface that's operated by dwell clicking, so you look at a key until it clicks. And this interface then sends keyboard and mouse events up to Minecraft. Now, it would have been really nice if we had put all of this interface inside Minecraft, and I'd still love to someday. It would be a really interesting opportunity to try out immersive eye gaze interaction methods, but there are a lot of benefits to keeping it separate like this. Everything we added in the mods up here, a lot of it would be useful for people with other control inputs as well, just reducing friction in the gameplay. So if you're using a joystick and some switches, you can benefit from a lot of this because it's been decoupled from the actual input modality. And conversely, here we've got an open source eye gaze interface that could be adapted for other games as well. And just a couple of words about that. We were very lucky because a couple of months into this project, while we were trying to work out how we would create an eye gaze interface that was free and worked compatible with lots of different eye trackers, this guy, Julius, released a piece of software called OptiKey. OptiKey is designed for full computer control, so advanced users, lots of typing and clicking and opening your browser, sending your emails. But we extended this, because it was all open source, we could extend it to allow for custom keyboards. So this means that users can define what they want on each of the buttons on their keyboard and adapt it to their needs. And then that enabled us to build Minecraft-specific keyboards, but also the open source community can take it away and do other things with it. But that all assumes that Minecraft can be easily accessed just by sending individual key events and mouse events, which can be difficult. Luckily, we were able to make a lot of changes within Minecraft itself and add the accessibility features that we needed. So we used the Minecraft Forge modding API. So this was created by the community. It's not an official API, but it allows us to hook into various game events and rendering loops and customize any classes that we need to fix whatever friction there was for our users. And to give you an idea of the things that we did, there were lots of them, but it often came down to replacing hold-down events with toggles, which we've heard a lot about today, or time-sensitive actions that might require a sequence of different controls, and maybe replacing these with the single key event and simplifying world dynamics. One of the things that was particularly difficult, though, was accessing the tiny UI elements in the inventory. Now, I'm sure all of the developers in the audience build your menus in a structured way so that they can be accessed via a keyboard, but Minecraft Java Edition is not. So it was quite difficult for users to access this fiddly thing. So at first, we just looked at all of the different ways you could access it. It turns out there are many alternatives, but we could find the ways that were as streamlined as possible, so existing methods without modifying anything, but that allow people to use conventional eye gaze mouse control to use the inventory. So here you can see in the eye gaze interface, I've clicked on a button to open the inventory. And now I select a hover. I can look where I want to hover the mouse. I get a zoomed-in window that allows me to select more precisely, and now I can select the number of the hotbar slot that I want the item to go into. But actually, even if a user is really good at selecting quite small UI elements in this kind of context, it can be quite tricky to control a mouse. And this is partly because of the visual feedback of seeing a thing wobbling around as your eyes move. Your eyes don't move as smoothly as you'd like. Software can smooth it out for you, but then it's not as responsive. So it can be tricky to do that. Some of our power users can do that fine, but people who might be less confident require using the eye gaze interface directly. So here we effectively retrofitted tab selection into the Java Minecraft inventory user interface. So doesn't need sound. So here you can select that. It's got sound. You can select directly the tab that you want to go to, and you can click on a button to hover the mouse one element to the right or down before selecting the slot that you want to. So now you can access anything in the inventory yourself without having to do careful cursor control. And before this point, the users that were getting by with existing Minecraft tended to rely on somebody else to fill up their hotbar with things that they were going to build with. So this helps to give people a little bit more independence in selecting what they want to build with. So at this point, we have version 1 of EyeMine, which we were showing a year or two ago. I'm not sure, you might have seen. We have at the bottom of the screen a keyboard with about 20-odd buttons on it. And they're quite small, but for our expert users, that's okay. So we were able at this point to start getting feedback from users. We've got Becky and Tiago here who started using this and are very good at using that. But that's still only people who are really good at eye gaze. And the much bigger audience is people who aren't at that level yet. So this was actually the biggest part of the development process and the thing that took the most iteration. I can show you the end result and it will look trivial. We now have an interface that you've just seen with about 20 buttons on it for advanced users. You can alternatively select one with larger buttons and fewer of them. Or if you're a complete beginner, you can go to a page that has only 5 buttons. This looks trivial, but obviously getting the gameplay dynamics distilled down so that you can have a fulfilling experience in Minecraft using only 5 buttons is really difficult. And it's not just working out what is the core game mechanic, what is the thing that people are going to enjoy and going to get them hooked, but also when you start trying to play that, where's the unexpected friction that suddenly you thought all you need to do is walk around and hit things, but actually, in order to hit things, you have to change the item you've selected or little details like that. So this was all about testing and iteration. So we spent a long time doing a lot of hallway testing, taking EyeMine to expos, and getting a whole raft of users to sit in front and play. And at this point, these aren't our final users. These aren't users with disabilities. But we're not ready to take it to our final users because we don't want to put them off Minecraft because they can't do the things straight away. This did allow us to very rapidly iterate or keep iterating until we had something that just worked. And some of the things that were important that came out of this, again, as with all of these things, there were loads of little things that all come together to give an experience that works. But some of the key take-homes, we made our tools context-aware. So if you just want to go knock some things down, you select mining. You don't have to work out what tool you should be holding while you do that. Or if you want to go attack an animal, you just have a sword. The hotbar should be pre-populated. This is something that took a while to work out, because whenever you demo at an expo, you've been testing the game beforehand, and you've got some things in your inventory just by accident. But actually, if someone's going to download this on the internet, and their parents don't know how to use Minecraft, and the kids never played Minecraft before, they need to be able to get going building immediately. It doesn't even really matter what items are in the inventory, so long as there's something, so that you can work out what experience you want to get from Minecraft before working out how to customize it and get the things that you want. Customization is really important, and whenever we added accessibility features into the mods, we tried to make sure that these were configurable, because as everyone has been saying today, everyone has very different needs and different ways of doing things, and it's important to make as many options available as possible. But if you show people all of the options before they've had a chance to run around and hit things, nobody knows what they want yet. So we minimized all of the customization at the start to just how fast do you want to walk, and how fast do you want your view to change when you look around the world. These were things that always came up as slight discomfort if it wasn't quite right and that people wanted control over. And all of the other customization is hidden for later when you get more experienced and you build up what you want to do. And we made some simpler game defaults, so it can be frustrating if you're just trying to explore the world, figure out how everything works, and then night comes. So by default, there is not a day and a night cycle unless you turn it on. And if you start mining down to the bottom of the earth and fall out and die, which is quite a common preference for kids, you shouldn't lose those bricks that you had in your inventory because you don't yet know how to get them back. So this is what we end up with. So this is how the typical demo goes. So you can see in the top of the screen there's Minecraft, and the bottom there are 5 large buttons. The first thing the user has to do is to look down at the Look with Gaze button, and now when they look up into Minecraft, they can look around the world. They can look at the Walk button to turn on walking, and now everywhere they go, they'll keep walking. They can turn on attacking, and they're now off chasing a pig. And one thing I haven't mentioned that was kind of important is whenever things have been toggled on, we've always got graphical feedback telling the user what features have you got turned on. Because otherwise there's a danger that you've taken what was previously a complicated control problem of needing to hold things down and press other things, and you've turned it into a complicated state problem of what have I got turned on at the moment? Why am I flailing a sword around? And then you can also, this moved on to the second page, you can do mining. One thing that's not shown is you can fly around. And if you mine deeper, you might find you want to turn on night vision so you can continue to see. And at this point, to be honest, by the time the user starts hitting a pig, the kid is entertained for 2 hours. But with the option of mining and flying around the world, this already gives you an experience of independently exploring a world and independently making your mark on it however you like. That might be by killing things, that might be by finding the coolest places and mining around to find the underground caverns, however you want to do that. This opens up that whole world to the user. And at this point, this is kind of like the introduction to Minecraft. If your eye gaze is better, you can work your way up and use the more advanced interfaces to do more things, to unlock more features. But what if you're one of the users I described who might be limited in your eye gaze abilities, but you want to do advanced things? You want to build, for example. This was really difficult for a long time, and took us a long time to work out how this should work. So at this point, you're going to see me operating eye gaze. I have relatively good eye gaze control, but I am using the simple keyboard. And you can see that in order to build, I have to look at where I want to place the block so that my crosshair is in the right location. I need to quickly look down to the eye gaze interface and select Use Item. And then I need to look up and precisely select the place again. I have good eye gaze, so this is doable. If your eye gaze is less precise, this is really difficult. And at this point, you now want to walk over to the back and build the rear wall. As you saw earlier, the way you do that is to turn on the toggle walking and then look at where you want to go and turn off toggle walking, which is fantastic and easy for anyone to use for exploring, but can be difficult to do very precisely to get to exactly where you want to go to. So the first thing we tried is incremental adjustments. So at this point, I am using a terrible eye tracker as a proxy for having bad eye gaze, which is why my head is in my hands. You don't normally need to do that. And I'm trying out an early eye gaze interface prototype where we've got a bunch of arrows that allow you to adjust where you're looking. And if you ignore at this point that these buttons are actually quite small and they wouldn't be in the final thing if this was for a poor eye gaze user. But you can see that I can look at the arrows and it just shifts my view by a small amount. And then when I've got the crosshair in the right place, I can place a block. I can do the usual selecting different items from my inventory. And then I can use the same arrows to move around the world. So I can toggle back into move, and now the arrows will shift me around. And as you can tell from my expression, this is a really tedious way to build. So in the language of Christopher's talk this morning, at this point, I've successfully designed an interface that allows users to do the thing, but they're not really having the experience. And we were stuck here for quite a long time. We'd kind of ticked the box of someone with less good eye control could build if they really wanted to, but they weren't going to. And we were stuck here for a long time until I walked past someone who was playing a first-person shooter, I think Call of Duty, using a legacy mode joystick setup. So anyone who doesn't know this, if your game has a two-joystick setup where one does looking and one does walking, some games offer you a legacy mode option where one of the joysticks will do the most important bits of that. So you splice together moving forward and backward with up and down of your left joystick and rotating left and right by moving your joystick left and right. Yep. And the other controls, if you need them for the gameplay, get demoted to the other joystick. But for many first-person games, you might not need to accurately look up and down. And I thought maybe this would work in an eye gaze setting. So we've ended up with a thing we call careful walk. We called it legacy mode for a while, but outside of this room, nobody knows what that means. And here we can add, we can totally change the way that Minecraft responds to gaze. So if we turn on this option, you can see in Minecraft, the screen has been split into three. The top and the bottom third are arrows that move you up and forward and backwards. And the center strip allows you to look left to rotate and look right to rotate the other way. And I'm a pretty good eye gaze user. But since we started doing this, I revert to this mode about 50% of the time when building. It just works in a way that previously didn't. So as a quick summary of some of the things I've mentioned, obviously I could talk for many more hours about all of the things that we did and all of the things that we learned. But just to put into the context of the initial spectrum of users, the first thing that we did was ported everything to an open source eye gaze interface. This doesn't really expand the user base, except that you don't have to pay £600 or more for a commercial eye gaze interface. We then did a lot of small things in Minecraft with mods to reduce friction, which expanded the pool of users to people who weren't necessarily super patient. We added in inventory control, which meant that people who were less confident in their eye gaze abilities could now be more independent and have more access to more of the gameplay. And then the biggest part of the project was opening it up to this much larger pool of users, which involved working out what is the core game experience and how do we make that accessible with very limited controls. And finally, adding a new movement paradigm allowed us to extend the experience that people with the limited control could have. I've got a few lessons to share beyond what I've said so far. The first one is slight caution. Beware power users who are too used to friction. So from the beginning, we worked with very good eye gaze users as beta testers. And they were super helpful. We absolutely needed to work with them. But they were almost too good at it. They are used to operating interfaces where things are difficult. And they are smart, and they will find ways around it. And that's great for them, but it meant we missed some of the crucial elements that people with less eye gaze ability required. And actually, challenging yourself to start from the very limited control end of the spectrum is a really strong, powerful constraint that can help drive more creative solutions. And everything we did to improve the 2-minute demo made the experience a lot better for the power users. But we wouldn't have discovered it if we hadn't done that. Something I haven't really touched on is how we supported different eye trackers. If you add in integration to random bits, particularly of accessible hardware, there's no guarantee that they're going to continue to work. During this project, multiple eye trackers, the companies got bought by big tech companies, and we lost compatibility because they weren't supporting third-party integrations anymore. So it was really important for us, and we thought this was quite important at the time. We didn't realize how important. We made sure that if your eye tracker isn't natively supported by EyeMine, but your eye tracker allows you to control your cursor and just continuously move your cursor to where you are looking, you can use that as an input modality for EyeMine. And actually, many more users than we expected use that version. I've got a few requests to the game developers in the audience. Fairly obvious and common one, please make your GUIs structured. It's not just Switch users that might benefit from being able to tab between different things with a keyboard. Think about how your game dynamics and the complexity of the dynamics can adapt to different users. What is your minimum game dynamic? And I was incorrect about what Minecraft's minimum game dynamic was until I'd seen loads of kids using it. And also, you do need to work with disabled gamers. Loads of people have been saying this, and it's so important. But you also need to make your developers play with limited controls, and not just test the one feature that they've just implemented and say, yes, this works, but actually build a house. Yeah, okay. Can I finish on use? It's 35 minutes. How many minutes have I got? 2, 3? Can I have 3? Okay. I'm going to allow one of our users to have the final words then, because this is 2 minutes. This is Ian, who was our first beta tester at the lower end of the eye gaze access spectrum, and he was interviewed by Mojang a couple of weeks ago for their Minecon.
So he's got cerebral palsy. It's a very wide term, but it's basically damage to the brain, and what it means for Ian is that he's got no independent use of any of his limbs. The fact that Ian can access a computer game that everybody plays it's no longer special. It's actually for everybody. It's very inclusive.
My favorite thing to do in the game is destroying buildings. I also love attacking animals and zombies with my sword.
EyeMine is a way of enabling someone with a very severe disability who finds it very difficult to be able to use their hands so that they can use a keyboard or a mouse to be able to join in with everybody else and play. It's an interface that lets them play Minecraft. When they look at the game, it's as if it's a mouse, their eyes behave like a mouse. So if you want to be able to dig, then you look at the dig button, you go back to the screen, look where you want to dig, and you'll start digging. If you want to fly, look at the fly button, look back at the screen, and you will be able to fly.
I love it. It gives me a new level of independence, so I can play the game without someone helping me. It's now an accessible game for lots of ages and abilities. I wish more games were liking this.
He can sit and watch TV by himself, but that's a very passive activity. Whereas with Minecraft, he's flying around, exploring the scenery. His life is so limited that everything that opens these avenues is amazing.
And when you see people who with very severe involuntary movement, who find it so difficult to be creative in any other way, to see them being so creative, which is what Minecraft enables them to do, for me, that's terrific.
Thank you.